welcome to the Young Turks. I'm Anna Kasparian, Jimmy Dore, John Idarola. Cenk is obviously not back in town yet. He's in Miami for a media conference. But he also does this MLK weekend trip with his boys every year.
BS.
Right.
Wait, sorry.
No, not the MLK trip. That's actually happening. But he is away in Miami, so for this...
And he does have a conference.
Right, he does.
Yes.
So for the remainder of this week, you will have panel discussions, a lot of fun on the show. Hopefully you watched our debate coverage on a Sunday night, which was really fun to do on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we have a lot of great stories for you guys. I want to encourage you, as we always do, to use the hashtag TYT Live to tweet to us as we do the show so we can read your comments, your concerns, maybe some questions. And yeah, let's get started. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Are you awake enough to do the show today?
I feel weird.
You just flew back from South Carolina.
Yeah, I've been telling you, I slept for, I think, 53 minutes last night.
That's amazing.
But
okay.
I feel good. I had a monster, and I feel good. Let's talk politics.
All right, let's do it. All right. Fox and Friends decided to celebrate MLK Day by bringing on Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece, a woman by the name of Aveda King. And while they spoke to her, they decided to touch on an issue that they obviously feel very negatively about, Black Lives Matter. Now let's take a look at two snippets of the interview, and then we'll talk about whether or not what they're reporting is accurate. Take a look.
Dr. King, let me ask you about this. You know, you look at Black Lives Matter, you look at the war on police and even the political tone in the nation. What would your uncle think about what's going on in his America today?
My uncle was a man of peace and reason. My daddy, his brother, Reverend A.D. King, they worked together to bring about peace, coming to the table with steps of nonviolent conflict resolution. And so Martin said, we must learn to live together as brothers, and I add as sisters, or perish as fools. Rather than stirring up that fear and that anger, we need to learn how to come to that table in the beloved community and put some solutions on the table, teaching people to use their words rather than bombs or guns or fists, and use their words to heal rather than to destroy.
Absolutely.
In a nonviolent way, for sure. Dr. Aveda King, thank you so much for your time today.
Okay, so her answer was a good one, if you ask me. But they were trying to get at something very specific. So Fox News has been very much against Black Lives Matter. They keep echoing this notion that all lives matter. Of course all lives matter, but the whole purpose of the Black Lives Matter movement is to raise awareness of the prevalence of attacks, shootings that are geared toward the black community, right? Yeah. So the reason why Black Lives Matter came about in the first place is because of things like Eric Garner, or situations like Eric Garner being placed in a chokehold and dying as a result of selling untaxed cigarettes, Tamir Rice getting shot and killed within 2 seconds because he was playing with a toy gun. These are all issues. Gray, yeah. Exactly. Freddie Gray is another one. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so that was the end of the interview, but there's a part that we're going to get to in just a second. First, let me get some initial thoughts from you guys.
Well, the intentionally misunderstanding what Black Lives Matter means. That's what they're doing. They're intentionally not understanding it. Even
though they've been corrected numerous times.
Numerous times they've been corrected. So saying, when someone says Black Lives Matter and then your response is, hey, all lives matter, that's the equivalent of somebody saying, hey, I'm wearing a pink ribbon for breast cancer awareness. Hey, all cancers matter. That's the exact thing that you're doing. You're trying to no, we have a specific problem. We're talking about specifically. Of course, all lives matter, but white people aren't being shot at the same rate by cops as blacks, and we all know that there's a systemic problem. So they're doing that. So it's to the point where, you know, Fox News, it's just like, you can't parody them anymore. They're already, it's like that was like a joke. Like that's how you would write a joke sketch for them. It's like, well, they're all like, we're going to keep getting it wrong no matter how many fucking times. So that, and then, you know, why don't you just throw in Benghazi and climate change, and we got a full morning with those guys.
Well, now you know their complete rundown for the day. How did you just predicted it.
We should have guessed how they would cover MLK Day. I wouldn't have guessed that they would so blatantly that all of their programs would be about this, and not just them, but conservative radio programs. I think it was a very bad answer because she accepted the ridiculous framing and then went on and said, he says, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? What would he have thought about Black Lives Matter? Well, I think you should use words instead of bombs. Okay, but they're not using bombs and they're not using guns. Like she accepted, yes, they are murderous terrorists.
I know, but you also have to understand that she's not a member of the media. She's not a politician. She's not used to the spin, right? So I don't begrudge her for answering the way that she did. she might have played into their framing, but I don't think she intentionally did that. By the way, I think it's a disastrous idea for her to appear on Fox News anyway, but I do commend her for having the balls to go on a show like that and, deal with them.
I don't have much familiarity with her, but I have read that she has been on numerous times because she tends to be pretty conservative.
Yes.
And the thing is, she could have, where was the mention of, like, okay, don't use guns, but if anyone would have understood the lingering anger and rage against the system, it would have been my uncle. And that same system exists, and so of course something like Black Lives Matter is inevitable and necessary.
And the fact
there was
that
nothing like
Martin
that.
Luther King was targeted by the FBI, spied on by the FBI, every phone call he had was taped by the FBI, the fact that his constitutional right, all because why? Because he was standing up for Black lives.
Yeah.
And believe me, those two phony on the Fox and Friends, they were the first. You would be the first ones to call Martin Luther King an agitator. If this was 1963, you'd be calling him an agitator. And why can't you just, why you got to agitate everybody? These white people are just having a nice community and you got to come here and stir it up. That's what they would be saying. And we all know that. And yes, I've seen this niece of Martin Luther King before, years ago. So she knows what she's doing. And if that was her one appearance, I would cut her slack too.
Right.
But I've seen her do this over and over, and this is her chance for fame, so she's willing to sell out the true meaning of Martin Luther King's legacy so she can get on TV sometimes.
All right.
Maybe she's also backwards like that Baldwin guy. Maybe that's her thing.
I mean, I have to apologize because I'm actually not familiar with her previous work or her previous appearances. So now that I know that information, it kind of changes my opinion a little bit. But let's go to the second video where they go a little further when it comes to a so-called war on police.
We've got a Fox News alert for you right now. A day of violence against police officers. 3 separate attacks this morning.
Well, all this as we are supposed to be remembering the peaceful message of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
All this when we're supposed to be remembering the peaceful message of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What does that tell you? That tells you that the shooters in these stories are all black, right? Oh my God, look at these black people going after these cops and shooting and killing them. Of course cops have to shoot and kill unarmed black individuals. Look at how much of a threat they pose. Well, here's the reality of the situation. Yes, there were 3 instances where police officers were shot. Unfortunately, 2 instances where police officers were killed. In the 2 instances where the police officers were shot and killed, the perpetrators were white men, not black men. But Fox News is purposely being deceptive to make it seem as though these individuals are black and that black people are dangerous. So the first one, let's go to the graphic number 1. The perpetrator was Herschel Jones III. He actually shot and killed a police official in Danville, Ohio, okay? The second shooting was in Holiday, Utah, and the police officer who was gunned down was named Doug Barney, and he was killed by Corey Lee Henderson, who, again, is a white individual. Now, the third story out of St. Louis did involve a black man who was apparently robbing a store. A police officer responded, and he did get shot at, but he did not die.
Yeah.
But it's important to give you those details and not be misleading in telling you about the acts of violence that happen in the country on MLK Day. They're using these instances as a way to expand their ridiculous objective and their agenda, and it's just beyond deceptive, and it drives me crazy.
So let me ask you a question. So let's say the KKK had a news show, and for whatever reason I got fired from this place and whatever, my show, and I couldn't be a comedian, and I need to make money, so I went and got a job at the KKK news show. Now, how much different would the KKK news show be from what Fox News is doing? They're just doing it, I think, in a more insidious way. Because KKK, you know who they are, you know what they're doing. But Fox News is trying to be sneaky about it, right? They're giving you palatable racism, and they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes because they know who they're broadcasting to, which is 7-year-old scared white people, and they want to keep them scared of black people because it helps them make money. Now, my question is, you wouldn't forgive me for going to work for the KKK, but why do we forgive people for going to work for Fox News? Because that is the most that is like not okay. That is so over the top, and that's what I'm saying. Like, there's no disqualification from polite society anymore. Steve Ducey and the other person with him, well, no one's going to go, hey, that racist shit I saw, because they do it every day, and now they're just accepted in mainstream culture, and people work at Fox News and then go work at normal places, and I think that we have to stop that. That's not okay that you can start your career there at Fox News or go there in the middle or end up at the end and then go to CBS or go somewhere else. That's not okay. And I think we should shame people who need to make money from racist organizations like Fox News, which is what they are.
Well, there's a reason why Fox News' audience is an aging audience, okay?
Right.
They're in their 70s, as you mentioned. They're older, and young people aren't tuning into Fox, and they're not tuning into CNN or even MSNBC. They're cutting the cord. And that's because they're getting their news online through digital media. And digital media, I would argue, holds these so-called reporters or anchors much more accountable than traditional media does. So I think that's the silver lining in all of this.
Yeah. Look, I can't cite all of the specifics, and I know that people do go back and forth, but I have a feeling that, like, Steve Ducey's not going to be one of those people that gets to, like, he's going to be on MSNBC.
Right.
I mean, it's possible. It tends to be people a little bit more behind the scenes, or they're straight reporters who will dabble in this sort of thing, but not be so clear with it. I sort of interpreted it differently. I was almost happy that they did this, because to me, this makes clear what their stance is. They're pretending that they're being forced to just talk about the war on police when we know that statistically deaths amongst cops are lower than they have been in recent years. So for me, it's like they're making it would be worse if they were actually subtle and if they were really trying to appeal in some underhanded way to African Americans. But anybody tuning into this knows where they're coming from. And so I think that's good. It shows people, no, this group is not for me.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, moving on to another clown, Joe Walsh. One-term Congressman Joe Walsh recently set out a number of tweets talking about what MLK would be in favor of and what he would be against in today's society. Now, the one-term Illinois congressman and current conservative radio broadcaster tweeted out the following. He said, Martin Luther King Jr. would not approve of Black Lives Matter. Dr. King was about bringing people together. He would say, all lives matter. You know, the last part of that is actually right. Martin Luther King Jr. would believe that all lives matter. But again, you're detracting. You are trying to distract people from a very specific issue that we're trying to address in the country. The reason why Black Lives Matter came about in the first place is because they are disproportionately targeted by officials, okay? Whether it's through stop and frisk, policies like that, or through, I don't know, cops shooting unarmed individuals that haven't really done anything wrong. So, again, Joe Walsh is playing into that conservative narrative, indicating that, hey, you know what? These Black Lives Matter protesters don't really care about all lives matter. They just care about themselves. No, they just care about addressing an issue that's been impacting them for decades.
Yeah, and again, he's going to be one of the people who has seen the refutation of that. If a person is shot and they're unarmed, and this happens over and over and over again, and they do the investigations and nothing ever comes of it, then whether an individual cop or an individual radio personality believes that Black lives don't matter, whether that's true or not, clearly the outcome shows that they do not matter as much to the system. And that's why the system needs to change. And that's why you had a good analogy with the pink ribbon and saying, well, then why are you focusing on that? All cancer's bad. But that doesn't even go far enough, because everybody knows that breast cancer is bad. It would be like if there was a cancer that killed tons of people, but nobody ever talked about it or cared about it. And then you were to like say, oh, toe cancer, and they're like, fuck that, that's irrelevant. No, it kills people. And the fact that he pretends like he doesn't understand that. There's so many terms like that, white privilege. You keep explaining what it actually means, and they don't accept it because they don't want to accept it.
So Joe Walsh is the Donald Trump light, because he's late to the game. Donald Trump learned early in his career that you say something outrageous, you get press, free press, and then when people start asking you to answer for your outrageous statement, you say something even more outrageous.
Yes.
And so Donald Trump has learned that, and he plays the press like a fiddle, and now Joe Walsh is trying to do that, and he gets attention, because the only time he gets attention is when he says stuff like this, because he doesn't ever say anything smart that's worth repeating. So it's only when he says crazy stuff like this, and some jagoff who owns a radio station in Chicago gave him a show, because that guy who owns that station is really rich and he doesn't give a fuck about the people. It's probably a corporation. It's probably Clear Channel.
So let me give you some more from Joe Walsh, okay? And he did get some criticism, and he responded to that criticism. So he continues with, MLK Jr. was all about the content of our character, not the color of our skin. Okay, Black Lives Matter is only about skin color. He also says, in fact, if he were alive today, Martin Luther King Jr. would lead an All Lives Matter march on Washington, D.C. Would be wonderful. Okay, so at that point, people criticized him, and they're like, okay, you just don't want to address the real issue here at all, and you want to make it seem like these protesters don't care about other lives, or, you get the point.
Yeah.
And he responds back with, never fails. Every MLK Day, you get some black folk telling white folk they can't comment on MLK and race because they're white. Bull, grow up.
No, but that's the thing. There are all sorts of comments you could make that the African American community would welcome, even from white people, allies that are trying to make positive changes to the system. Just when you can't get away with saying racist shit, oh, now my rights are being infringed. I want to throw, why can't I say the N-word, huh? Why can't I say it? They don't understand that when they say those things, it's like, oh, this is a shortcut. You're a racist. I don't need to think about it. You're clearly a racist.
I was wondering how Martin Luther King would react to the Black Lives Matter, and I was like, I guess we'll never know unless we ask Joe Walsh.
Yeah, good point. I mean,
exactly.
Joe Walsh is very intuitive. He would know what Martin Luther King Jr.
He's got his finger on the pulse, and I also would like to know what Chief Sitting Bull would think about the Redskins team name. I bet you Joe Walsh knows that.
Right.
Probably,
right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I bet he knows a lot of things about a lot of different cultures.
He does seem very well-rounded.
Yeah.
All right, so he also continues on with even more offensive tweets. He says, if MLK were with us today, he'd say, quit whining. We've made amazing racial progress. You'll never know the racism that I knew. Celebrate that.
And then you just hear a snap of a bullet. Because I don't know if you remember, Joe, they fucking shot him dead because he was black. That guy who said, there's no more racism. In your head that you just created this story where MLK says there's no racism anymore, he also got shot right after he said that.
And you put that in the context of all the other civil rights leaders who were assassinated, all the civil rights volunteers and workers who went to the South and were killed, who were lynched, who were killed just while trying to do their job. And then it wasn't investigated because the authorities in that area didn't want it to be investigated. Just gloss over all that.
I'm sure if Martin Luther King was alive, what are the chances the one guy who could have told us racism isn't real anymore was fucking killed by a racist? What are the chances?
Weird. So
really weird.
Crazy world.
I feel like, look, they don't want to acknowledge institutional racism. They don't want to acknowledge things like, I don't know, black men are incarcerated at higher rates for possession of marijuana compared to white individuals who, by the way, possess and smoke it at similar rates. They don't want to address the insane statistics that came out of New York during the stop and frisk policies and how something like 90% of the people that were stopped and frisked were minorities, and they didn't find any weapons on them or drugs on them. It's all about targeting specific individuals from specific backgrounds. They don't want to acknowledge those things. Are things different today compared to how they were when MLK was alive? Obviously, okay? Segregation is not legal anymore, even though it does happen in some ways when it comes to socioeconomic status and separating people in terms of schooling. Absolutely. Yeah. But that institutional racism is still there, and it needs to be addressed. If you don't want to address it, then you just want to completely deny that racism exists. You want to deny your own privilege, and I think that's obvious from his tweets. But to sit there and tell black people to be complacent and to be happy with the situation they're in now, while their children are being shot and killed by police officials when they have no weapons and they haven't done anything wrong, I don't know. I feel like that's going above and beyond in terms of you being racist.
I think we got to be careful. I agree with everything you're saying. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to give Joe Walsh too much of our breath because he's obviously doing this for those reasons. You know, it's kind of like somebody tweeted at me one time that my coverage of the Cologne sexual assaults on New Year's Eve, that they hated me for it, and that he's a German and he hates me for it. So I tweeted back to him, I just saw a Hitler documentary. You guys don't come off so good. Now, I did that for the same reason Joe Walsh is doing this.
To get him riled up.
Man, he went fucking crazy. They couldn't retweet it more. I was giggling, and I don't want to sit here and get worked up over Joe Walsh because I know it's going to make him giggle because he's irrelevant.
Don't worry. At 5 minutes from now, I'll forget he exists.
Okay.
Yeah, he's irrelevant. I think it's important to mention him. He is irrelevant, absolutely. But he represents a group of people in this country that continuously deny that racism exists. And they help fuel that fire.
He's doing it for money. He's doing it because he knows it'll get him attention and all the racist Trump voters will come listen to his show. It's just for money. He knows he actually does know better. He just does this.
Yeah. But there's a good and a bad side to acknowledging that he and people like him are out on radio doing this. I mean, the bad side is there are tons of people that on their drive to work and their drive home or whatever they're driving trucks, they hear BS like this. But the good side is that he is broadcasting on radio, which is a format that makes cable news look innovative and full of life.
Yes.
You mean AM radio?
AM radio, even worse, yeah.
Because I'm on the lefty FM radio, and I really think I'm bringing some
he's
innovation.
Conservative. That's all AM radio is.
Yes.
Is conservative commentators.
Thank you, John. I want to make a distinct. I want to delineate between my lefty 90.7 FM KPFK and WBAI in New York, The Buy.
So,
on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Jimmy Dore. Anyway,
have you delivered that line
I've
before?
listened to your radio show and I really like it. It's really good.
Thank you very much.
So I don't listen to a lot of talk radio, but this is going to be funny. Some of you already know this, but I listen to Jimmy, and I also love listening to Michael Smirkanish on POTUS on satellite radio.
Yeah, you've talked about that.
He's just, look, I don't agree with him on everything, but I love the way he speaks. He's so eloquent, and he's like fast-paced, and he's passionate.
You can tell he's wearing a tie.
Yeah, and he's aware. Look, he's aware of what's going on. Get out of here. All right. You know what? I'm actually going to take our first break because I want to make sure I read some of your TYT lives. When we come back, Marco Rubio explains why he bought a gun on Christmas Eve. Hey guys, welcome back to TYT. We now have an awesome panel for you guys, which I'm super excited about. Keith Powell, who you probably have seen on the network, he was on The Point. I think you might have appeared on other shows, right? Maybe Think Tank?
I might have bounced around. I believe that this is the second major one that I've done, so I might have done some small things here and there.
All right. Well, he was awesome on The Point, so I'm really excited about this panel.
Thank you.
And we also have Hannah Cranston, obviously, from Think Tank. Hannah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm excited.
I know, me too. So we have a lot of great stories in this hour, including a fiasco within the tennis world. Apparently, there are some indications that games are being fixed by people who can profit from the games being fixed. So we'll get to that later on in the hour. But first, I want to start with a really important story that I don't think is getting enough coverage, on our network included, by the way. All right. The citizens of Flint, Michigan have been drinking contaminated water, and it's finally starting to get a little bit of attention from politicians, not just on a local level, but also on a national level. Now, the water has been contaminated with lead, and if you look at images that are now circulating on the internet, you can see just how obvious it is that the water is contaminated. Apparently, the officials in Flint, Michigan changed the water source. And when they did so, they cut some corners. And unfortunately, the piping that was utilized leaked the lead into the drinking water. So people have been getting sick. This hasn't been getting a lot of attention. And so the Democrats decided to talk about this a little bit during the last Democratic debate. So let's take a quick look at what Hillary Clinton had to say and then what Bernie Sanders had to say, and we'll give you some more details on what's happening.
Well, Lester, I spent a lot of time last week being outraged by what's happening in Flint, Michigan, and I think every single American should be outraged. We've had a city in the United States of America where the population, which is poor in many ways and majority African American, has been drinking and bathing in lead-contaminated water. And the governor of that state acted as though he didn't really care. He had requests for help that he basically stonewalled. I'll tell you what, if the kids in a rich suburb of Detroit had been drinking contaminated water and being bathed in it, there would have been action. So I sent my top campaign aide down there to talk to the mayor of Flint to see what I could do to help. And I issued a statement about what we needed to do. And then I went on a TV show and I said it was outrageous that the governor hadn't acted, and within 2 hours he had. I want to be a president who takes care of the big problems and the problems that are affecting the people of our country every day.
Thank you. Senator Sanders.
What Secretary Clinton was right, and what I did, which I think is also right, is demanded the resignation of the governor. A man who acts that irresponsibly should not stay in power.
So they're speaking about Governor Rick Snyder, which we'll get to in a second because he did respond to those calls for resignation. But before we get into the details of what the president's planning on doing and what could happen in the future with this crisis, I want you guys to jump in, share your thoughts.
Well, Flint, Michigan is almost, they've had so many problems over so many years. They've been steeped in such poverty. It's kind of becoming like the city that America has forgotten. And it makes me so angry that they continue to be forgotten over and over again. We have a very large problem in this country of income disparity. And when all of a sudden you're not being useful to the country, you get forgotten about. And I'm so proud of the Democrats for bringing this issue up. Mm-hmm. This is not an issue that any Republican has talked about, even still today are not talking about, unless they're in response to the Democrats that are talking now. And I do think that there are so many aspects of our society that are being tucked away and hidden about and forgotten about that need to be brought to the forefront. So good for them.
Yeah, honestly, during the Republican debate, there was absolutely no mention of this issue whatsoever. So it does feel good to know that it's on Democrats' radar. But it is unfortunate that Governor Snyder doesn't seem to be aggressive enough when it comes to combating this issue.
Yeah, I think that's my issue, too, with it, because when there are situations like this, it really makes you question not only the credibility, but the motives of the very people who are supposed to be keeping you safe. Now, when they made this transition in April 2014, they had people complaining about rashes and hair loss. And this was something that was entirely preventable. When you have public water and you don't use corrosion control treatment, there's going to be lead in the water. And so they didn't use the treatment. So then they're going to pretend that they're surprised that there's lead in the water. And even when it was declared a state of an emergency, a few days ago, it still took 5 days for Flint to get bottled water, which is it's unacceptable.
Yes. So a lot of people have been donating bottled water to the people of Flint, Michigan. And to your point about the state of emergency, President Barack Obama did declare a state of emergency in Flint on Saturday. Sanders had already called on Snyder, a Republican, to step down, but Clinton used the opportunity of her closing statement at the debate to argue that if the crisis had happened, again, in a rich Detroit suburb, he would have been quicker to act, right? Now, Hillary Clinton's statements were absolutely true.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, and I also really love Bernie Sanders' strong statements about it as well.
Yeah.
Now, Governor Snyder did respond to it. So let's go to graphic number 6, and here's what he had to say. He said, political statements and finger pointing from political candidates only distract from solving the Flint water crisis. Well, it didn't seem like you were that interested in solving it.
Seems like you were distracted. Yeah.
Really? I mean, you don't like the finger pointing. I can totally understand that.
Frankly, finger pointing is the only reason why he had any kind of action in the first place.
Exactly.
And when all of this information started surfacing from people who were like, hey, I'm seeing, blood levels in children, lead blood levels for children rising, and all these other sort of scientific analyses going into how much lead was in the water, the guy who released that, they started calling him a rogue employee. That sounds
insane.
like finger pointing to me.
Oh,
yes.
my God.
Right?
He also said, we are committed to ensuring every Flint resident has access to clean and safe drinking water. To find out more, and then he links people to a website. Now, the president's actions authorize the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA, to coordinate responses and cover 75% of the cost for much-needed water filters, filter cartridges, and other items for residents, capped initially at $5 million. Now, according to the Detroit Free Press, they get into the details as to why this happened. So Flint's drinking water became contaminated with lead after the city temporarily switched its supply source in 2014 from Lake Huron water treated by the Detroit Water and Sewage Department to more corrosive and polluted Flint River water treated at the Flint Water Treatment Plant. The state Department of Environmental Quality has acknowledged a mistake in failing to require the addition of needed corrosion control chemicals to the water. That caused lead, which causes brain damage and other health problems in children, to leach into the water from the pipes and fixtures. Again, this is something that, it has been covered by the media a little bit, but this is a crisis. This is drinking water, okay? This is not a privilege. It's something that we need to survive. And these people have been forgotten about. I think you put
Something similar happened in 2014 where the Koch brothers, one of their industries, contaminated Detroit's waters. And there was very little coverage of that as well. I don't know how outraged we need to be in order for anybody to listen.
Right. Well, here's what you need to do in order to get people to listen. Be a big-name politician who points fingers, or it has to be a community that is wealthy, that's been impacted, right?
Yeah. So something very similar to this scenario happened in D.C. from 2001 to 2004. And so that can kind of give us some insight to what the trajectory is going to look like for Flint. And basically, families that tried to then sue for the damages that their children faced because of lead poisoning are still not getting fair trials, and they failed to give them a class action suit. So we can kind of see what the future is going to look like for the Flint case, and it's unfortunate. It's wrong. It's morally wrong, is what it is.
And the problem with all of that is that the residents who are mostly minorities and mostly poor do not have a voice to advocate for them, and the wealthy communities do, and that's really, it becomes about who do we talk to, who provides the voice for the voiceless, and we need that. We need those advocates in society, or we're going to have states of emergency all over the country.
Absolutely. Another part of the country where we're seeing a state of emergency is Porter Ranch, California. So let's go ahead and jump to that. There is a new video of the methane leak in Porter Ranch, California, and it doesn't look so good, especially considering the fact that the leak started in October of 2015, and we're now well into January of 2016, and there's no end in sight. Now, SoCal Gas, the company behind the leak, alleges that they will have this issue solved by late March. But this latest video shows you in infrared just how disastrous this leak is, and some in California, or at least in the area, believe that their pets are now being impacted as well. So let's take a quick look at the video, and you'll see what it, so there's a regular video, and then there, through that infrared vision, you can kind of see just how bad the leak is. Now, understand that Porter Ranch is a very affluent part of the San Fernando Valley. The people living there have money. All of them have been, or most of them, have been evacuated to safe housing, so they're not inhaling the methane and getting sick as a result of that. It could cause nosebleeds and other health concerns. But pets are now experiencing similar issues. And so people are wondering whether or not there's going to be any type of compensation or any type of just payback for what's happening to them. They're being displaced. Their animals are getting sick. Their kids are getting sick. And so where's the accountability? What happens next? In Porter Ranch and nearby communities of Chatsworth and Granada Hills, animal owners are seeing unexplained ailments and behaviors in their pets. Many are questioning whether the methane and odorants escaping from the leak in nearby Aliso Canyon may be to blame.
I think that's a big duh.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is the SoCal Gas Company is telling people not to leave their pets outside. Hello?
I'm recently a pet owner. I adopted a dog about 2 months ago. I've never had a pet before in my life, and this dog was a rescue dog, and it actually really surprised me how many homeless pets that there are that have to be outside.
Right. Yeah. And
right.
even
all I'm saying is that it kind of is a catch-22. It's kind of impossible to go. Your pet cannot be outside when there's so many homeless pets on top of the pets that actually live or thrive and exist outside.
Right, and forget about the pets. I mean, don't forget about the pets, they're important, but also think about the natural wildlife that lives in that area that's being impacted by this, right? So this has so many ramifications, not only to human health, not only to our environment, but also animals living in this area, pets living in this area, and there needs to, in the very least, be enough compensation to ensure that these people can, pay for the places that they're living in now. Mm-hmm. Their property values are going down. There's so many different components of their lives that are being destroyed because of this company refusing to do its due diligence and making sure that there are safeguards in place to do something should a leak persist. And a leak has persisted, but they don't have a solution, which is why they're projecting that, hey, maybe in late March we'll be able to solve this. That's insane. This started in October.
Well, yeah, that's another issue with it. They're saying there's all these short-term effects, right? So they're talking about the nosebleeds and people, not going outside and things like that. And then the long-term effects, yeah, you're going to be exposed to benzene, which is, a carcinogen for humans. But that's long-term. And then that's not even tied, it's not even correlated with the fact that, okay, we're not going to be able to fix this for a few months. I don't understand why that's not being put together in the media, that people are being exposed to this, people and animals, like you were saying, wildlife. I mean, we don't know how that's going to affect the ecosystem. A lot of the Porter Ranch residents were saying that they were finding dead birds in their backyards. So there's a lot of different components here. And you're right, like there needs to be a way that these people are compensated, but also bigger picture, figuring out how this town is going to come back from this.
Right. I mean, we have an entire political party in this country who continuously boasts about how they're in favor of deregulating everything, whether it's the banks or massive corporations. And this is the product of deregulation. This is what happens when you don't ensure that there are laws put in place to protect the people. And the reason why so much deregulation is happening is not because the Republican Party is more powerful than the Democratic Party. It's because both parties have members that have been bought off by these corporations, that are funded by these corporations, and so they have a vested interest to continue to deregulate.
It's capitalism run amok.
Right.
I don't think that that argument that happens in the political conversations happens because they say it's more capitalistic to let people, let the market figure out what it wants to do. But when the market starts imposing their will onto other people, there does need to be a small amount of socialism that actually changes regulates what they're able to do to people who cannot defend themselves.
And also, for all the free market people out there who are like, yeah, deregulate and let the free market decide. What are the people of Porter Ranch, California supposed to do? SoCal Gas is their gas provider. Right? And so you don't have a decision to make. You don't have a choice, right? You have to rely on this one company. This company knows it. And so if there's a monopoly like that, then they get to do whatever they want. There is no competition here whatsoever. Okay?
Absolutely.
And if there's no competition, they get to do whatever they want. And they're going to cut corners. They want to make money. All right, let's go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, the big tennis controversy that everyone's been talking about, we'll give you the details on that and more.